Welcome back, or just welcome to Winning Within. Today, I'm going to talk about perspective, and I'm going to talk about the victim mentality and the empowered mentality, and I'm going to explain why this is so powerful and how this can have a huge impact on your life. So, what I want to start by saying is that event and perspective are not intrinsically linked. What happens in our lives and the meaning of that event, of that circumstance, is always separate. And there is never an inherent meaning to that event. There's never an inherent or an innate perspective to that event. And I want to emphasize this because it's really important that the event, it's not like a coin and you have event and on the other side, oh, this is a bad event or this is a good event. It doesn't come with the event. The event is something, the perspective, sorry, is something you attach to the event always. You are always the person that places the perspective or places the meaning on the event, whether you're conscious of it or not. And the reason that this is important is because when you realize this, you'll recognize that the events in your life actually, you're not a victim of your circumstance. That's why this is important, is that when you recognize this, you will realize that you are not a victim of your circumstance. You are the master of your fate, the captain of your soul, like that poem says. You are the steersman, you are the sailor. The events in your life are the wind that pushes the ship, but you're the sailor. So you ultimately have control over your direction and you can use the wind to get to where you want to get to. The sailor doesn't say, all right, I want to go east, so I hope the wind's blowing east today. The sailor says, I'm going east, and since I know how to orient this the sail, then I'm going to use the wind to get myself east, regardless of where the wind's blowing. So the events in our lives are like the wind, and the perspective that you choose to place on that event will orient your ship in a certain way. For example, you just got fired, let's say. Let's say you just got fired from your job and you feel really stressed and you're like, fuck, like I don't even have that much money saved up. I'm gonna have to pay the rent, I'm gonna have to pay this and that, like, and you feel yourself like, fuck, like, why did I lose my fucking job? Shit. And you're thinking, this is such a bad thing, like, just my luck kind of thing, you know, like, fuck. That, holding that perspective, and some people will object to this and say, like, you know, like you're thinking like, what's that saying, like polymara or something, where you're like just thinking delusionally positive. You know, some people will object and say, like, be realistic, losing your job is a bad thing. And to that, I would say, no, it's not. It's not a bad thing. Losing your job is just an event. It's actually neutral in and of itself. The reason you're so firm about in your belief that it's a bad thing is that that's the collective belief. And that's what you've heard so many times. That you know that if you asked most people, hey, I just lost my job, is that a good thing? Most people would be like, well, no, that sucks. But just because most people believe something, that doesn't mean that it's true. So losing your job in and of itself is not a bad thing. And the reason that it's important to recognize that is because if you hold the perspective, fuck, I just lost my job, that's really bad, holy shit, just my luck. What you're doing is you're saying, I want the victim mentality. And the victim mentality does not like to be empowered, therefore does not like to make decisions that will advance him or herself in his or her life. The victim mentality likes sympathy. So the victim mentality, when you say I want the victim mentality, then what you're actually saying is, what I want is sympathy. I don't want things that will improve my life. I just want sympathy, either from others, because I can say, yeah, I just lost my job, and like, and then people can be like, oh, boo-hoo, you know, like, fuck, that sucks for you, you know. Or you can feel sympathy for yourself and be like, oh, I just lost my job, you know, like life's so hard for me. And you get a perverse kind of pleasure for that. If you're honest with yourself, you will realize, you will know that you get some sort of perverse pleasure from saying like, oh, during times where you've been like, yeah, my life's so hard, like you get some sort of pleasure for that, and that is the exchange that you make when you choose the victim mentality. So let's go back to you losing your job. If you hold the perspective that this is a terrible thing, then all your actions will then bleed from that perspective, or will flow, let's say, from that perspective. This is such a bad thing. And then you're going to take actions based on that perspective. So maybe you'll start drinking, maybe you'll start smoking, whatever. But it's unlikely that you're going to take actions from an empowered perspective. And so let's compare it to, right, I just lost my job. I definitely feel stressed. I definitely got to pay the rent. But you can recognize that, like, even though this feels bad, that doesn't make it so. And even though I feel stressed, and even though if I could choose, I would keep my job, let's recognize that, like, sometimes life knows better than you. Sometimes life has given you a few curveballs that in the present, like, you probably recognize this in your life already with a few things. That sometimes life has thrown a few curveballs at you, things you did not want in the moment, and then you look back and you're like, fuck, that was such a blessing. But as human beings, we don't have the foresight enough to be like, you know what? Right now, like, let's say you have a panel and you can press buttons and control what happens. You're like, you know what would be great for me to lose my job, because I know why. I know what's going to happen eventually. Boom. You know, we don't have that foresight. Life does. And it's up to us to trust that. So it's not just positive thinking, because if if you have the empowered perspective, the empowered mentality, then what you can do is be like, all right, I just lost my job. What's the best thing that I can do right now? Let's also recognize that, like, this might be a really good thing. Because, for example, you might lose your job and then be like, right, I just lost my job, and you sign up for like a welfare for now, and and you're like, oh, well, you know what? Actually, like, I don't know, for the past like few years, I have had this idea of like doing my own thing, but I was always like afraid, because I was like, oh, I've got the safety of this job now, and like now I don't have that safety, so it's kind of nothing to lose. So I could just like try and do that, and then let's say you start your own thing, and it's your thing that you enjoy and stuff, and ultimately years down the line you're like, what a blessing that I lost my job, right? And basically you can extract the best possible scenario from adopting the empowered mentality, which gives you the best possible chance of doing something positive out of it, and putting yourself in a position that you would want to be in. So that that sums up essentially what I wanted to say, is that perspective is not innate. It's not inherent. There's no meaning to anything. But it can be very society can really seduce you into believing that certain things are good and certain things are bad. But actually, good, if you Google good, it means approved of, which is circular logic. It means what is good is what people say is good, which means that it's arbitrary, because then what is good could be bad if people said it was bad, which means that there's no inherent meaning. Right? Like, if the definition according to human beings is good means what we say is good, then what we say is good could be bad if we said it was bad, which means that what is good is not actually good. What is good is just what we think is good. And you can choose to think rather than following what you've heard. So to close this video, I would say I would I would encourage you to think about the meaning that you give the events in your life, and recognize that that meaning is your choice, and the importance of choosing a perspective that's going to be most helpful to you, because ultimately there's no correct perspective. There are just more or less helpful perspectives. So I would encourage you to think, particularly the things that you think are bad that have happened to you or happening to you, the things that maybe you're not happy with. Think, try, just as a creative exercise. Think, all right, so let's pretend that I have like the most empowered mentality in the world, and I have this event in my life that I know that right now I don't like it. What would I, if I had the most empowered mentality in the world, how would I think of this? And try to extract the opportunity that is in there. I don't know where this comes from. I think in Chinese the symbol for crisis is like half the symbol is something like problem, and the other half of the symbol is opportunity. There's balance in the universe. For everything that you think is bad, there's an equally good attached to it, and it's up to you to extract that. So you can choose to look at the bad side, or you can choose to look at the good side. You can choose to look at the unhelpful perspective, or you can choose to look at the helpful perspective. Ultimately, it's your choice, and it's your responsibility as well. So that's it. I'll think of a way to finish videos in a smooth way sometime. But for now, that was it. Perspective is your choice.